Hello, welcome to Lackluster Reactions. I'm a Lackluster Actor, here today for my final view of Isekai Shikkaku, also known as No Longer Allowed in Netherworld. What would be the best Isekai of the year if we didn't also have Re:Zero, and realistically Dazai really makes that not as clear-cut a victory as it would be any other year. There's much I can say about the characters, which is how I usually end up breaking these videos down. But today, I think breaking it down by story arcs is going to be the best. Especially considering how much each of these are focused on the characters involved anyway. And then clean up our less focus on companions at the end. So first, a look at the second town and the first use of Dazai's powers. The main pieces in the spell are Ise and a little bit of Annette, but mostly Ise. The two are mirrors to each other, both having spent enough time with adventurers to become jaded to them and their selfishness. However, while Annette changed her tune about Dazai fast, Ise spends most of the arc doubting Sensei as just another adventurer, his wish for death being just another quirk. And she rightfully sees the relationship between Sensei and Annette to be toxic and exploitative, seemingly as if he was just using her, which, after all she has seen, it is more than enough for her to not give Dazai a chance. When the village is attacked and her negative view of other worlders is given credence, she also watches Annette to be the first to be taken over, which Sensei is left as her only choice to try to take on the hero. But when the battle actually hits, that is when Ise's opinion shifts, her seeing not only Sensei using his poisonous body and storytelling abilities to their full use, but also Annette herself stands up against an ability which is said to be unbreakable. In the span of 5 minutes, she realizes her impressions of the two were off the mark. Not entirely, but her understanding of both were surface at best. Ise gives us right away a reasonable authority figure, one who of course would see how things stand and mistrust Sensei and patronize Annette. She is the critical eye Annette never was as far as we have seen her. While Suzuki was the one taking control of the city, Ise was a true first obstacle our group faced, and in the end she approved after our party proved themselves worthy. And as for our main villain of the first real battle, and the one who was the first person we saw Sensei write the stories down for, we have Suzuki. Suzuki, like most of the heroes, and I mean most, had a real hard life. He was heavily bullied in his world, leading to him feeling that he lacked control on that side. Eventually it became bad enough for him to attract Truck-kun to bring him over to the fantasy world. Which, quick aside, I enjoy how they referenced the meme directly and gave it as reason why so many people get hit by trucks. But I digress. When Suzuki is on the other side, it was not as if the trauma went away, especially when there were many who treated the other worlders different. The only difference was that now he had power. So, when he reached the end of his rope, he struck out at others, where he might have hurt himself before. And with that, the hero fell. He became someone who could only trust others if he was in control of them. Which this draws direct parallels with, well, direct would mean it was actual reference, but draws at least some parallels with one of the better isekai anime, Rising of a Shield Hero. Just like Narutami there, here Suzuki has lost faith in those around him, or more accurately, had no faith in them to begin with, humans being cruel to him from the beginning. One might try to paint him as monstrous for trying to take control of everything, but he is a man utterly alone. Humans are pack animals. We are not designed to operate alone. And his only option was to make company for himself. Which then leads to the fight, where he continues to solely rely on his power, ordering the beast he has as his allies to fight for him, and then Annette right after. He does not lift a finger, because he was never a fighter, because he always felt powerless, because this power he has is the only good thing he has in his life, and the only method he knows how to operate where he actually feels powerful. Strip that away, and his only option is to try to kill himself, not attack his enemies. And in the end, he's the first for Dazai to send home. He's returned to a daily life, working an average job. But it's better than what he had, both in his original life and his time in the fantasy world. After having no control and having empty control, he now stands at zero. For the first time in his life, he has control. Real control. And I hope he makes it right this time around. Suzuki was a good starter villain because he was the opposite of everything Sensei did throughout the entire season, but especially in the first few episodes we saw him. Making his own choices and being free. Suzuki, even when he was controlling others, he was never free, just playing by the standard he was supposed to play as the hero, then as a tyrant, and the fear that lay behind it if he failed. The one who holds the leash are often still at the end of the leash, control being its own form of prison. But Sensei did well to snap our starter villain out of it before he did something even worse than the things he already did. We then move on to the Beast Village Arc, where we deal with the least interesting antagonist so far, Kaibara. The main threat of the arc, an active threat to all beast people present, one who is able to overpower even their king. First, let's talk about his powers. He is the first of the heroes who are the 7 deadly sins, the fallen heroes who work to corrupt the land. And his sin is gluttony, whose power matches. He has giant mouths which eat those around him and conquer the powers of things he has eaten, matches with his desires for cannibalism. All the pieces make sense. However, why is he so boring? I mean, I'm watching a king pull out massive martial arts powers, seeing the fight to try to take down this powerful hero who is able to easily eat this man. And I cannot bring myself to care about any of that. I have loved this show up to this point, but find myself for the first time in this season of the show, wanting the segment to speed up and get to the next scene. And his past is just him being bored of living the rich kid life. True, I can understand not being able to control the food you eat is a problem. It's a symptom of a controlling environment, a possible sign of abuse. However, the moment you lose the will to live, being your parents paying off the victims you beat up is not really sympathetic. I mean, it was not even enough to draw Sensei's interests. And what happens in the end? He's used for another character's character arc, comes back because of the extent of his powers, and then used as a plot coupon so we can see the Demon Lord's daughter again. 100% the weakest villain so far. The only interesting part of Kaibara was when Tama was beating him up. Which brings us to the entertaining part of the Beast Village arc. Tama's story. The first of the main characters to be examined, but like most of them, the best place to look at them is in terms of their arc. Where, after traveling with the main cast across 2 continents and to her home, we return home and find her as royalty. Royalty with something to prove. The moment she knows there's a fight, that her father is fighting against one of the heroes, that someone who has hurt up people is on a rampage, She jumps into the fight without thinking, which instantly puts her father at a disadvantage and gets herself almost killed, if not for her father's sacrifice. A brass action fitting with our main source of damage all this time, but one which does not work this time, the enemy outclassing her far too much, and so we are forced to run away. It is around here we first hear Tama's backstory. A perfect family, a proud king and queen, with a prince who was strong and a princess who was a gentle soul. Everything was beautiful until the day tragedy struck. One accident taking the lives of both mother and son, leaving a mournful king and a daughter who worked to do what she could to replace her deceased brother. Except that was never the case. It was always the brother who was gentle, always the sister which worked to be the best fighter she could be. But that was never what the father wanted, never what he thought the kingdom needed, and so pushed his children to be what he thought they needed to be, the strong prince and the kind-hearted princess, even against Tama's wishes, her dreams, or her potential. Which brings us back to modern day, back to Tama arriving in the throne room before all others, to her charging forth to save her father and people. And she does not stand a chance, especially with Kaibar using a bite of the king's arm to copy the techniques of their bloodline. Not because Tama's weak, not because she lacks the ability to win the fight, but because she is still buried under the expectations of her father and the confusion about which path she should go down. Does she play the perfect princess? Does she try to fill the role of her brother? Like so many questions in the show, the correct answer ends up being neither. Again, Sensei steps out without hesitation, presents the story, the options, and encourages Tama to choose neither. Not to play the puppet for her father, not to bind herself to the image of her lost brother, but to walk her own path, to fight because she loves to fight, not because of any imitation of a family, to defeat Kaibar not as duty of nobility, but because she wants to punch him in the face, to unfetter herself from trying to impress, trying to follow, trying to get approval or praise, and instead live her life as she wants to live, free. And with it, we see Tama at full power, the power she had in her all this time, the power that was held back by the expectations of the people around her. In a brief fight, she was able to lay Kaibar on the ground. True, it did not stick, and we needed a Demon Lord Zara to step in, but we and her father were able to see a spotlight of who Tama truly is, and how powerful freedom truly is. People are often surrounded by the expectations of others, where they are smothered or thrown in the foot. But Tama and Sensei show us a glimpse of the freedom which comes when the expectations are swept to the wayside, and someone is allowed to be themselves, unapologetically. Tama is beautiful, and here's hope she gets another chance to go all out in the future. Now, the reason I'm going with story arcs over characters today, despite me still focusing on characters, is because of the World Tree arc, which I need to talk about in its entirety, while still reflecting on the characterization of Yamada and Esuke. So, where do we begin? We are given a legend partway through the episode about the World Tree and a fairy attached to it, a fairy which grants wishes and will come down to protect the town whenever it is in danger, which, when our heroes arrive, it already is, the tree beginning to die. We also learn the current situation in town, groups of adventurers having more or less taken over the town, building a casino as their base at the base of the tree, as well as using the leaves of the tree as opiates, being strung out in a nearby cave. The town needs saving and is willing to ask anyone passing through for help. Cue Yamada, the first hero to truly live by the hero ideal, and has not fallen like other otherworlders. He sees the situation in black and white, is ready to do anything to save the town, and is ready to chase down those who are wicked. Which one of those wicked? Being Eske, a woman who lives on the outskirts of town. When the heroes took over, she made a bar right next to the casino, and began walking beside them in a way that clearly shows corruption. So, plain and simple situation, yes? Until Sensei, with a mediocrity of an attempt to get the larger picture, finds that, I actually think it's pronounced Ashe runs her business not to get rich, but because she is paying protection money for the whole town. The owners of the casino are willing to take it all for themselves if she does not meet her quota. And so she sacrifices herself each day for the village. Then, when the village is saved, townspeople also push Yamada to take out the witch, the traitor, the seductress, which Mr. Black and White refuses. Even though he crushed the casino, he has no reason to attack the unarmed woman just for the implications he was sleeping with the bad heroes. So she is just exiled. End of story. Or not, because Yamada is then offered to be kept on as a bodyguard to protect against the bad heroes if they come back. Why would they? Why? Because the village has realized how profitable the casino is and how the selling of their sacred trees leaves are, and plan to continue to do the same thing those they just ran out of town did. But it's okay, because they are the good guys, so they are not doing anything wrong. Then, final tryst, the one anyone who was paying close enough attention saw coming. Ashe was the fairy of the tree, the one who protected town if things happened. She protected the town even if it was not the way the villagers wanted her to, with the only person who believed in her and trusting her being the random adventurer traveling down the road. So what does she do? In the most beautiful scene of the first season, the world tree dies, having lost all mortals who would see it as a protector instead of a commodity. In one single instance, with the only ones who believe in Ashe being someone who has no need for the tree and its continued existence, it perishes, just like the old gods leaving a humanity alone in its selfishness. The last gift provided by the spirit, little more than an endless bottle of pills. There is so much to unpack here, the first being Yamada's black and white morality. Someone is always right and others are always wrong. Sounds good on paper, but the problem is, where is that line drawn? Who is there to enforce that morality, and what is keeping others from crossing that line? In the end, by crushing the casino, all he did was allow other people to be evil. There was no peace, there was no good. There was no victory for Yamada. Of all the heroes we have seen, even the villain Sensei defeated, Yamada came off everything at the end worse off than those we saw killed, because being a hero was his only thing. When the world is not black and white, what does someone like him have? But this large topic is the subjective morality. We had the village head thanking Yamada for chasing away the evil adventurers, then turning around and saying about how they were going to do the exact same thing, while still in the same next sentence telling Yamada to protect them from anyone evil trying to stop them. It is said that we all are the heroes of our own story, but in truth, all too often, we hold others to standards we ourselves do not keep. We threw the book at those who hurt one or two people, while praising those who treat thousands as statistic. We see those who protest against abortions themselves getting abortions when they, as the sole exception, need one. They go back to protesting the next day. People are not objective creatures, They time and time again justify themselves as right because they are the ones doing it. The village is not just an isolated occurrence. It is humanity, plain and simple. And, of one final note, is the seeming nihilism of it all. This is a show about a main character who continues to try to die. And the solution to the problems this time is not to save the tree, the artifact of times long past. It is to let it die, let the shade rest, because humanity cannot have such beauty in the world without trying to corrupt it for their own ends. And the only person who truly is able to appreciate the beauty of that death, in the end, is someone comically suicidal like Dazai. But enough about my favorite arc. Now we move on to the third continent, where we deal with the short arc of the Orphanage. And with it we start with the third wheel of the arc, and what would become the fifth wheel of our party, if but temporarily, Toru. Toru started the arc as a bandit, a biker who has the ability to transform animals into vehicles. He was only a minor threat and is more in line with Kotaro, someone who is minor enough a villain to not even need to be talked about. Except he came back. Partially due to the cat bus reference, but partially to help us in the fight, which I think he did, or other characters carried the fight more, but he was there. I have no idea why he was there, but he was there. So congratulations, Toru, you are a minor forgettable villain, but you did enough with your scene time that you gotta mention, even if I have nothing really to examine you by. Take a bronze star for effort. Now that we have the comic relief out of the way, let's move on to the real hero of this arc, Saito. A man who turns out to be an otherworldler and something more. We first hear about him from two events. Food is mysteriously being left for the orphanage, and there was a wolf hunting the desert at night. We meet the man, a man on crutches, who works to bring food to the orphans every day. We see him as a timid man, and do not even have signs he is an otherworldler at this point. All he is someone who takes care of others, who quickly connects with Nia. No reason to be suspicious at this point. But then he reveals both his status as someone from their world and the story of his one mistake. A man in a wheelchair who had a best friend there to support him. However, when the moment came when his friend was in trouble, he froze and ran away. And it was this point, while he was running away, where he reached the lowest point in his life and Truck-kun came to collect. A simple, yet tragic story. And in this world he is given the power to become a werewolf, the power to help orphans by day and hunt bandits at night. He is a hero in both forms he took, though the werewolf form comes with a few temper problems. But I think the important part of it is that the transformation allows him to walk. With his condition likely a connection to why he became meek, that power would give him his power would give him legs fits well. In the end, Nia stops him from hurting anyone while in wolf form. Sensei, having overheard the story, then uses his powers to send Saito home. Not just to the other world, but to the exact moment he left. The exact moment he was in despair and tried to run away. The moment his friend found him and forgave him for running away. We end up with the two of them together, as if nothing had even happened. Overall, it was a short arc, one episode long, and we were given much more with the others. However, Kaito's story is no less important than any of the others who were sent home. In an arc about looking for strength, he is a character who was weak, who ran away from his problems, who betrayed his friend, and who wallowed in that guilt the entire time he was in the fantasy world, to the point he did not even become corrupt like other heroes. But he was forgiven, because some problems are not as bad as we think they are, and friends will have your back even at times you do not have theirs. Mistakes can be fixed. Sometimes all which is needed is a second chance. But the other half of this story arc was just as interesting, because we had development for our second companion, Nia. Nia, the little boy we first saw as a young boy who gets by telling lies and tricking people out of their money, who joins the party after realizing Dazai is a true hero, and not like the ones which he had to deal with. Nia, who sat on the sidelines mostly until this point. Arriving in the desert, the place where Nia grew up, he quickly tries to prove himself useful, but quickly is denied as such, both having the bandits he said that they were safe from attack, while also not being able to be of any use in the fight. Which begins the episode of Nia feeling like he is just a little kid, useless and dragging down the party. But at the orphanage, Nia meets the mysterious sponsor of Saito. The two quickly connect through their shared feelings of uselessness. Saito for his past, and Nia for his present, which is the biggest stepping stool for Nia. He wants to be strong, and works to rush his development so that he can stand beside the others now. But strength is not something built in a day. So in turn, connecting with someone without strength is more useful to a more nuanced development than meeting a big, beefy hero. And we get to see it pull off not soon after, where Saito is out of control. Nia, who has struggled with the blade, drew the sword not to cut others down, but to protect others. Basic lesson I know, but we still have some in our world who still are completely untrustworthy, who talk like they are strong for throwing the first punch or having rippling muscles. Having someone take the step to becoming a hero by protecting others is still something which is very much needed. And it is good to see Nia standing as a hero, regardless of which lessons are learned. But that is what we currently have. We have hints of more backstory with the heroic sword he has and him gaining the eye of one of the 7 fallen heroes, but we lack backstory at this time. Still, Nia is part of the team, even wet behind the ears as he is, and I expect more growth and more secrets answered in the future. We then find ourselves at the final arc of the season, the Dwarven Capital. Here we spend time with the third member of the church, Wolf. He appears as a powerful ally, using his control of the wind to wipe out the advancing armies, all while being a popular pretty boy. However, we quickly find him drinking heavily and visiting a mysterious cabin at night. We learn his backstory about how he trained a few other warriors, but in the end one killed the other, before she went to become one of the fallen heroes. A powerful sorcerer who saw what he was working towards crumble, leaving him no other allies but the bottom of a bottle. And honestly, that's it. Just as Sensei said, he was an extra in the story. Still more important than Toru, but his connection to the story leads to why he was attacked. He had no part in the resolution of the actions, just being there to set up the pieces. Do not get me wrong, strong and pretty, but little to actually examine. More importantly, we have our second fallen angel, and the more interesting of the two so far, Yuriko, the fallen angel of greed. While not as big a threat of Kaibara, she was able to turn the tide of war against the dwarfs, and managed to nail down the local priest, mostly because of their past connection. And frankly, she was much more interesting than Kaibara. So, in a past life, she was a caretaker for her sister, and she was not allowed to be anyone else. Highly abusive home. She was entrusted to taking care of her sister 24/7, while setting aside her own checkpoints in life. When all other members of her class graduated, her father was too busy to take her or even acknowledge the day. And when she took a walk to the school herself, her father hit her for leaving her sister alone. No wonder she wanted to escape. In the new world, she became the favored apprentice of Wolf, and despite her powers being weak, she was given it her all to train, spending personal time with Wolf, and all in all actually living her youth, living her life, as she was unable to do in the other world. But then her sister came. But then her teacher started spending more time with the one with the powerful light magic, the one who might actually be able to defeat the Demon Lord. Even in this new world, the old came knocking, threatening to take back everything she had worked so hard to become, the nice, peaceful, free life she had. And so she lashed out at full strength against the representation of everything bad which had ever happened to her. And she felt miserable. She did not understand her powers and thought that the wilting flowers was her killing them, not stealing their youth like hers had been stolen. She thought she killed her sister, and so she declared herself greed for choosing what she wanted to do over her love for her sister. Of course, her full power shown is impressive. As soon as she gives into her negativity, she not only is able to effectively steal people's youth, but also manages to control skeletons. Not sure how that works after learning what her power actually is, but it gives our non-writer characters a chance to shine before Dazai came in at the last moment. And after finding her sister still alive, she was more than willing to surrender. She happily walked back with her sister to the other world. We do not know about the father or about any other complications still waiting for on the other side. However, we know that she gave up the new world for her sister, showing greed being truly selfless. Yuriko was a wonderful enemy hero, especially after Kaiba. I'll keep saying that every time I get a chance to. And the few bands we found along the way. She had everything stolen from her by unfair situations. But what truly broke her was thinking she had harmed the person she loved most. And honestly, Yuriko deserved some moments to be a little more selfish, more ready to live her own life. But it's good to see her experience some youth in New World, and hope for now the two sisters may be happy. So, we find ourselves at the home stretch. But we are out of story, for now at least. So let us end by focusing on the two we have seen throughout the entire story, who have had more opportunity than anyone to tell the stories, starting with Annette. Annette is the first party member we recruit after she, developed feelings for Sensei, why I am still trying to figure out. Yes, she was burned out hard from being a sycophant to the regular adventurers and their otherworld overpoweredness. However, the fact she fell so hard for Dazai within 5 minutes just because he does not know what's going on, does not want to play the usual game, and tries to kill himself a few times in her presence is not exactly the most stable of relationship starters. And this continues on through the season, Annette being both comedy and steady ally. She would jump to do stupid things for Sensei, pulling his coffin, lend him money he would never pay back, become jealous when he and a woman enter the inn together after Dazai's been out all night. Well, on the other hand, she is the highest level among them, the strongest fighter, but cleric so versatile in the fight. That said, as mentioned earlier, there was the time, through her own will, she was able to shake off the mind control which was supposedly unbreakable. This shows not only a definitely strong will, enough to be one of the 5 high priests in charge of the regional churches, but also her commitment to Dazai. The problem is it only happened once. Not through a fault of her own, she has excellence with what she's been given. But when we focus on at least two characters every story arc, if you're not one of those characters, you are kind of left fighting monsters in the background while Sensei actually solves the problems. And the only real highlight showing Annette's full resolve she was not even conscious for. Well, the other two companions have had partial arcs themselves. Annette has not had that luxury yet. In the end, Annette did nothing wrong, but the story has yet to give her a chance to shine like the other two. While I'm confident a good story arc would allow her to stand equal to Tama, right now she's delegated to hero member number 1. Hopefully she is dealt a slightly better hand next time. So, which brings us to the final chapter to examine. The main character, the undoubtedly the most interesting person in the room, Dazai, also known as Sensei. The famed author who stared deep into the darkness to the point where he could no longer see any light. Dazai marks this as his second big anime appearance, and the first time in which it's him and not just one in a cast of all named after authors. There are 3 main topics that I wish to speak about when talking about Dazai. So expect this to be 3 times as long as everyone else. He deserves it. He is the main character, so. The first is his desire to die, because as Bungo Stray Dogs taught us, you cannot have an accurate Dazai without him constantly trying to kill himself. Let's look at the comedic highlights. Since the first moment he arrived in the world, he has been constantly trying to overdose on his sleeping pills. Though after his chase of Sachan began, it became more of a funny background event. Both show human resilience in not dying, though healing spells helped, as well as the blasé attitude he has with his own life. And it turns out this pays off in dividends when it gives him a standing immunity to poison, but also making him the most poisonous thing alive. 3 times he takes out a major enemy, outmatching them simply because he outpoisons them. We have the tree, the strongest of the wolves, and the scorpion/motorbike combo. A perfect joke that can only be pulled off with someone as laughably suicidal as Dazai. Then there's the running gag of people making threats and him jumping at the opportunity to die, much to the confusion of everyone involved. The large highlight of this is back in the Beast Village, with the 2 Oni guards guarding the door. He jumps at the chance to be eaten, and there's no indication if this is part of his planning inside, or if the man's dead serious. And finally, we have the coffin. The man discovers a coffin in the first episode and proceeds to spend most of his day lying in it, having the rest of the party doing the dirty work of dragging it. That is until close to the end of the season, when he convinces the dwarves to make him a motorized coffin, which itself leads to hijinks as much as dramatic entrances. Dazai does something only Dazai can do with death. Look it in the eye and say yes. He welcomes his impending doom with his empty smile and in the most comedic part of the show. Nothing deeper, just needed to praise whoever wrote all of this. But we're not just here for comedy. Because while Sensei is trying to kill himself, he is also here to teach life lessons to those of the New World. The most prominent of which is to take one's own path. This starts as far back as the 2nd episode, though it was at first played for comedy. Several times this episode, and later episodes, Dazai is made to choose 2 simple options to choose between. And he never chooses between the options. There was always a 3rd option. Always a path not laid out plainly before him, even if it is simple as saying, "Why are you asking me?" But as comedic as the start is, it also saves the princess. As opposed to the 2 choices presented to her, both of which are bad in their own ways, she instead decides to follow Dazai into death. and the moment she tells him she does not want to die, Sensei saves her, not too obsessed about his own goal of making others do what they do, not obsessed with his own goals to force others to do what they do not want to do. This ends with the princess on the throne, doing more and better than what she would have done if she had just stuck to the options the world presented to her. The same with his powers. He had used his powers 4 times, 3 to send the heroes back and 1 to empower Tama. What do all 4 of these times have in common? They are all trapped. Trapped by their own powers and the expectations placed on them. Trapped because of regret, because whether abandoning your one friend in the old world or believing you killed your own sister. Trapped because of the expectations placed upon you, and believing you only have 2 choices. Heck, how did Dazai discover the key to the 4 problems? Well, not Suzuki's starter villain, but how did he solve the rest of the problems? By wandering off. By when all the others are concerned with the plot, he does his own thing and discovers diaries, discovers old ladies, or simply eavesdrops on random conversations. By not being beholden to the plot, by being free from the trappings of what he is actually supposed to be doing, he helps free others. But, of course, the greatest of this is with the World Tree Arc, where he walks through the black and white narrative that the others are pushing, talks to the outcast of the village, stood up for her despite what everyone else thought, and was the only one to come out on the side of the spirit of the tree. And with the powers of a wish at his side, what does he ask for? An endless supply of his pills, because that is what he wanted. In a world which ties people down, which forces stupid decisions because there is no other choice, Dazai is a hero who severs the ties of what should be and actually works to help people at the core of their problems. He is not a generic hero in a world of generic heroes. He is a breaker of molds. Who better to stop heroes out of control? But how Sensei changes the world around him is only part of the story. The final data point which makes Sensei such a great character is that he changes too. You're right, it is subtle, not easy to see looking at him throughout the season. You could go through the entire 12 episodes and still see the same man wishing to die. Yet Sachan in her takedown of him is correct. As time has gone on, his attempts to comedically try to kill himself, the continued chase for death, has gone down. Sure, he still prefers travel by coffin and even had a custom-made coffin produced. But as for semi-serious attempts at placing his life in peril, no. The more he interacts with his 3 party members, the more you can see the shift starting. Heck, even more than that, look at him every time he uses his power of storyteller, whenever he brings an end to a person's connection to the world, or when he empowers Tama. Even with his same melancholic expression, you can tell the stories and the people this world are throwing at him are making him slowly defrost, slowly more interested in seeing the next story, to look over the growth of his friends. One more reason to live to tomorrow. And when this is brought to his attention, he breaks down. Because the sorrow, the dance with the end of life, that is his everything. It is what allowed him to successfully write his stories, and it was what connected him with Sachan to begin with. Who is Dazai without depression, without the suicidal lurch to his end? He was losing what was one of his most defining features, and it scared him, and he ran away. Yes, in the end, the fairy's promise of him meeting Sachan again is, in the future, sobered him up, and the season ends with him and his party going on to the next adventure with the usual tone. But he is still a man changing, a man with a heart more opened than it appears, who stood up and saved so many people just because he could. And he is off to save more. There's a spark of life in Dazai's eyes slowly changing as he gets closer and closer to reuniting with his love again in the future, now that she is the Sin of Pride. There is so much potential in our protagonists to grow, probably never truly leaving the coffin, but at least willing to take another's hand, especially when they are most in need. And that is what makes Dazai, above all else, one of the most interesting protagonists this year. And that brings us to the end. There were more characters, but they were even less interesting in total, so they don't get a spot. Overall, it's safe to say Dazai stole the show, which is hard to do, not hard to do when you're the main character, but having a hero who is not just an overpowered insult character, but instead someone who subverts the average isekai tropes from the perspective of a wise man who has long been done with life, who is slowly learning to live it again. Season 2 cannot come soon enough. But for now, this has been my review. Thank you everyone who actually stopped by and watched this video. And I look forward to see you all again next time. Thank you very much.